Welcome to Jersey Reads the Classics, an audiobook podcast delving into the finest works of our literary masters. Unfortunately, it's read by this woman.
What the hell? Who cares? Let's go on an adventure.
Hello, and welcome back to Jersey Reads the Classics with your host, me, Rosie D. Candia. Thank you so much for tuning back in. So we are done with our first book, and I will always think about it fondly. But it's now time to move on. Like anything else in life, it's time to move on. We let go of the past and we move forward. So when deciding to pick up whatever I was going to read for the second book, I was going to pick something a little bit more somber, a little bit more serious. But then during this time that I'm doing this particular book, it's during the coronavirus and we're all quarantined and what have you. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to stay whimsy, I'm going to stay fantastical and magical. So I decided to go with, can I get a drum roll please? Can I get a what? Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. That's right. I've never read this book. Once again, never read it. I've actually never even seen the Disney classic, which I heard is nothing like the book. Well, there's differences. Anyway, this is the first published edition. It's by J.M. Barrie. It was published in 1911, and it actually was called Peter and Wendy. All right. So I'm also not wearing a smoking jacket. I said I was going to get a smoking jacket, but in honor of the characters of Peter Pan, because the characters of Peter Pan actually are in their pajamas a lot. I'm not going to tell you the reason why if you haven't read the story. So I decided to get this fabulous robe and kind of be in a pajama state of mind. So in honor of the cast of Peter Pan, I'm in my pajamas, and it actually makes it much easier for me. You know what I'm saying? Because every week, I'm just going to be wearing this outfit, and it's comfortable. Who doesn't like a silk robe? Okay, enough blathering. Time to move on to our book, Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. Chapter 1. Peter breaks through. All children except one grow up. They soon know that they will grow up, and the way Wendy knew was this. One day, when she was 2 years old, she was playing in a garden, and she plucked another flower and ran with it to her mother. I suppose she must have looked rather delightful, for Mrs. Darling put a hand to her heart and cried, "Oh, why can't you remain like this forever?" This was all that passed between them on the subject, but henceforth Wendy knew that she must grow up. You always know after you are 2. 2 is the beginning of the end. Well, that doesn't sound so whimsical. I know they say terrible twos, but I don't think of 2 as the beginning of the end. But, you know, from a child's perspective, and this is all from a child's perspective. Well, not always, but let's see. Of course, they lived at 14, and until Wendy came, her mother was the chief one. She was a lovely lady with a romantic mind and such a sweet mocking mouth. Her romantic mind was like the tiny boxes, one within the other, that come from the puzzling East. However, many you discover there is always one more, and her sweet mocking mouth had one kiss on it that Wendy could never get, though there it was, perfectly conspicuous in the right-hand corner. The way Mr. Darling won her was this. The many gentlemen who had been boys when she was a girl discovered simultaneously that they loved her, and they all ran to her house to propose to her except Mr. Darling, who took a cab and nipped in first. And so he got her. He got all of her, except the innermost box and the kiss. He never knew about the box, and in time he gave up trying for the kiss. Wendy thought Napoleon could have got it. But I can't picture him trying and then going off in a passion, slamming the door. Okay. Mr. Darling is definitely a shrewd one. He knew how to get his girl. Because remember, in those days, people weren't like driving around. They were like doing this on foot. So good for you, Mr. Darling. You know what they say, the early bird catches the worm. So he got Mrs. Darling. Good for him. All right. I like somebody that is, what can we say? They know what they want and they go after it. Yeah, you go, Mr. Darling. Mr. Darling used to boast to Wendy that her mother not only loved him, but respected him. He was one of those deep ones who know about stocks and shares. Of course, no one really knows, but he quite seemed to know. And he often said stocks were up and shares were down in a way that would have made any woman respect him. Mrs. Darling was married in white, and at first she kept the books perfectly, almost gleefully, as if it were a game. Not so much as a Brussels sprout was missing, but by and by whole cauliflowers dropped out, and instead of them there were pictures of babies without faces. She drew them when she should have been totting up. They were Mrs. Darling's guesses. Wendy came first, then John, then Michael. For a week or two after Wendy came, it was doubtful whether they would be able to keep her, as she was another mouth to feed. What the hell is that? So you have a baby, you have 9 months to think about this, and now you don't know if you're going to keep the baby? What are you going to give it? To the orphanage? Is that what happened in those days? I guess so. Well, you know, they say you play, you pay. You better pay up, Mr. Darling. Okay? That's all I'm going to say. Mr. Darling was frightfully proud of her, but he was very honorable, and he sat on the edge of Mrs. Darling's bed, holding a hand and calculating expenses, while she looked at him imploringly. She wanted to risk it, come what might, but that was not his way. His way was with a pencil and a piece of paper, and if she confused him with suggestions, he had to begin at the beginning again. Now, don't interrupt, he would beg of her. I have £1.17 here, and 2 and 6 at the office. I can cut off my coffee at the office. Say 10 shillings makes 2, 9, and 6. With your 18 and 3 makes 397. With 5, naught, and my checkbook makes 897. Who is that moving? 897. Dot and carry 7. Don't speak. And my own, and the pound you lent to that man who came to the door. Quiet, child. Dot and carry child. There, you've done it. Did I say 997? Yes, I said 997. The question is, can we try it for a year on 997? Of course we can, George, she cried. But she was prejudiced in Wendy's favor, and he was really the grander character of the two. Okay, so he is actually going through his books to see if they can afford Wendy. What the hell is this? I know this is olden days, but honestly, you know what? You should have thought of something else. But I guess we're going to learn a lesson and see that at least they're being conscientious of the fact that they know they have another mouth to feed and to plan accordingly. All right, but Mrs. Darling sounds like she's such a darling. She's such a dear. Remember mumps, he warned her almost threateningly, and off he went again. Mumps, £1. That is what I have to put down, but I dare say it would be more like 30 shillings. Don't speak. Measles, 1.5. German measles, half a guinea. Makes 2.15.6. Don't waggle your finger. Whooping cough. Say 15 shillings, and so on it went. And it added up differently each time. But at last, Wendy just got through with mumps reduced to 12.6 and the 2 kinds of measles treated as 1. There was the same excitement over John, and Michael had even a narrower squeak, but both were kept, and soon you might have seen the 3 of them going in a row to Miss Folsom's kindergarten school, accompanied by their nurse. Okay, so they still haven't learned the lesson. They've now had 2 other children, but I forgot there was no birth control in these days. So at this point, they're just shooting, and whatever lands, lands. But obviously, he landed 3 of them. Okay, and they have a nurse. Okay, look at them. They don't have money, but they got a nurse. Mrs. Darling loved to have everything just so, and Mr. Darling had a passion for being exactly like his neighbors. So, of course, they had a nurse. Oh, so he's living up to the Joneses, of course. Isn't that so typical? Anyway, as they were poor, owing to the amount of milk the children drank, this nurse was a prim Newfoundland dog called Nana, who had belonged to no one in particular until the Darlings engaged her. She had always thought children important, however, and the Darlings had become acquainted with her in Kensington Gardens, where she spent most of her spare time peeping into perambulators and was much hated by careless nursemaids, whom she followed to their homes and complained of to their mistresses. Well, look at that. They do say dog's a man's best friend. I wish I had a dog. I want to rescue a dog, but I'm kind of like the rescue dog, so I don't have a dog. But the point is this. All right, they made do, and they got Nana, who is a Newfoundland. I love those dogs. Those are so lovable. Oh, so cute. Who doesn't want a nursemaid who's a dog? Hello? I mean, come on now. And she loves these kids. That's all I'm saying. She proved to be quite a treasure of a nurse. How thorough she was at bath time, and up at any moment of the night if one of her charges made the slightest cry. Of course, her kennel was in the nursery. She had a genius for knowing when a cough is a thing to have no patience with and when it needs stocking around your throat. She believed to her last day in old-fashioned remedies like rhubarb leaf and made sounds of contempt over all these newfangled talk about germs and so on. It was a lesson in propriety to see her escorting the children to school, walking sedately by their side when they were well-behaved and butting them back into line if they strayed. On John's footer days, she never once forgot his sweater, and she usually carried an umbrella in her mouth in case of rain. There is a room in the basement of Miss Folsom's school where the nurses wait. They sat on forms while Nana lay on the floor, but that was the only difference. They affected to ignore her as of an inferior social status to themselves, and she despised their light talk. She resented visits to the nursery from Mrs. Darling's friends, but if they did come, she first whipped off Michael's pinafore and put him into the one with the blue braiding and smoothed out Wendy and made a dash at John's hair. Well, look at Nana. You know what? She's the kind of nursemaid anybody could use. How rude that they're so mean to poor Nana. They're just jelly. That's what I say. They're just jelly because Nana knows what's going on. No nursery could possibly have been conducted more correctly, and Mr. Darling knew it. Yet, he sometimes wondered uneasily whether the neighbors talked. Here we go again, worrying about what the neighbors think. He had his position in the city to consider. Nana always troubled him in another way. He had sometimes a feeling that she did not admire him. "Oh, I know she admires you tremendously, George," Mrs. Darling would assure him, and then she would sign to the children to be specially nice to Father. Well, ain't that a bitch? Mr. Darling needs his ego stroked constantly, and what does Mrs. Darling do? She provides that. And poor Nana, maybe she doesn't admire him. Maybe she knows who he really is. I mean, he's probably not a bad guy, but obviously he's got some self-esteem issues. You know what I'm saying? All right, proceed to the book. I'm interrupting a lot today. I'm feeling the need to. Okay. Lovely dances followed, in which the only other servant, Liza, was sometimes allowed to join. They got another servant. I thought they were broke ass. Such a midget she looked in her long skirt and maid's cap, though she had sworn when engaged that she would never see 10 again. The gaiety of those romps, and gayest of all was Mrs. Darling, who would pirouette so wildly that all you could see of her was the kiss. And then, if you had dashed at her, you might have got it. There was never a simpler, happier family until the coming of Peter Pan. Ooh! Mrs. Darling first heard of Peter when she was tidying up her children's minds. It is the nightly custom of every good mother after her children are asleep to rummage inside their minds and put things straight for next morning, repacking into their proper places the many articles that have wandered during the day. If you could keep awake, but of course you can't, you would see your own mother doing this, and you would find it very interesting to watch her. It is quite like tidying up drawers. Oh my God, that is such an interesting metaphor. So the mother goes around tidying up their minds. I kind of like this thought. It's like at the end of the day, you tidying up your mind of all the worries and stress and all the things that no longer serve you, but their mother cleans that up. Oh, this is interesting. This is deep, deep, J.M. Barrie, deep. You would see her on her knees, I expect, lingering humorously over some of your contents, wondering where on earth you had picked this thing up, making discoveries sweet and not so sweet, pressing this to her cheek as if it were as nice as a kitten, and hurriedly stowing that out of sight. When you wake in the morning, the naughtiness and evil passions with which you went to bed have been folded up small and placed at the bottom of your mind, and on the top, beautifully aired, are spread out your prettier thoughts, ready for you to put on. I love this. It's kind of like every day waking up with a fresh new mindset. So, I mean, we'll talk about this in the woo section, but let's notate this. She's clearing out their minds so the next day they can wake up with fresh, clean minds to begin the day anew. I love this. I don't know whether you have ever seen a map of a person's mind. Doctors sometimes draw maps of other parts of you, and your own map can become intensely interesting. But catch them trying to draw a map of a child's mind, which is not only confused, but keeps going around all the time. There are zigzag lines on it, just like your temperature on a card. And these are probably roads in the island, for the Neverland is always more or less an island with astonishing splashes of color here and there, and coral reefs, and rakish-looking craft in the offing, and savages in lonely lairs, and gnomes who are mostly tailors, and caves through which a river runs, and princes with 6 elder brothers, and a hut fast going to decay, and one very small old lady with a hooked nose. It would be an easy map if that were all, but there is also first day at school, religion, fathers, the round pond, needlework, murders, hangings, verbs that take the dative, chocolate pudding day, getting into braces, saying 99, 3 pence for pulling out your tooth yourself, and so on. And either these are part of the island or they are another map showing through. And it is all rather confusing, especially as nothing will stand still. What the hell is going on? Hangings, murders, and stuff. Oh my God, I hope she's not cleaning things like that, thoughts out of her children's minds like that. But I know where he's going with this. Very astute. There's a lot of things going on in your mind. Think about that. How many times a day you thinking of shit that you shouldn't be thinking about? Drop it. You know what I'm saying? Stay in the present. We'll talk about that in the woo-woo too. There's a lot of woo-woo going on this. Of course, the Neverlands vary a good deal. John's, for instance, had a lagoon with flamingos flying over it at which John was shooting, while Michael, who was very small, had a flamingo with lagoons flying over it. John lived in a boat turned upside down on the sands. Michael in a wigwam. Wendy in a house of leaves deftly sewn together. John had no friends. Michael had friends at night. Wendy had a pet wolf forsaken by its parents. But on the whole, the Neverlands have a family resemblance, and if they stood still in a row, you could say of them that they have each other's nose, and so forth. Oh, so Wendy has a pet wolf. Is this the Game of Thrones? Maybe she's Sansa. If you haven't watched Game of Thrones, watch it. It's a great show. I love it. On these magic shores, children at play are forever beaching their coracles. We too have been there. We can still hear the sound of the surf, though we shall land no more. Of all the delectable islands, the Neverland is the snuggest and most compact. Not large and sprawly, you know, with tedious distances between one adventure and another, but nicely crammed. Kind of like my apartment. When you play it out by day with the chairs and tablecloth, it is not in the least alarming. But in the 2 minutes before you go to sleep, it becomes very real. That is why there are night lights. Occasionally in her travels to her children's minds, Mrs. Darling found things she could not understand, and of these quite the most perplexing was the word Peter. She knew of no Peter, and yet he was here, and there in John and Michael's minds, while Wendy's began to be scrawled all over with him. The name stood out in bolder letters than any of the other words, and as Mrs. Darling gazed, she felt that it had an oddly cocky appearance. Yes, he is rather cocky, Wendy admitted with regret. Her mother had been questioning her. But who is he, my pet? He is Peter Pan, you know, Mother. At first, Mrs. Darling did not know, but after thinking back into her childhood, she just remembered a Peter Pan who was said to live with the fairies. There were odd stories about him, as that when children died, he went part of the way with them so that they should not be frightened. She had believed in him at the time, but now that she was married and full of sense, she quite doubted whether there was any such person. Besides, she said to Wendy, he would be grown up by this time. Oh, no, he isn't grown up, Wendy assured her confidently. And he is just my size. She meant that he was her size in both mind and body. She didn't know how. She knew. She just knew it. Mrs. Darling consulted Mr. Darling, but he smiled pooh-pooh. Mark my words, he said. It is some nonsense Nana has been putting into their heads. Once again, he's got to blame Nana. I mean, really? Everything comes down on Nana. What is she, the Bill the Lizard of this book? Ugh. If I was Nana, I would take a big dump on Mr. Darling or in one of his shoes or piss on his leg. That's all I'm saying. Go, Nana, go. That's what I would do. Just the sort of idea a dog would have. Leave it alone and it will blow over. But it would not blow over, and soon the troublesome boy gave Mrs. Darling quite a shock. Children have the strangest adventures without being troubled by them. For instance, they may remember to mention, a week after the event happened, that when they were in the wood, they had met their dead father and had a game with him. It wasn't this casual way that Wendy one morning made a disquieting revelation. Some leaves of a tree had been found on the nursery floor, which certainly were not there when the children went to bed, and Mrs. Darling was puzzling over them when Wendy said with a tolerant smile, I do believe it is that Peter again. Whatever do you mean, Wendy? It is so naughty of him not to wipe his feet, Wendy said, sighing. She was a tidy child. She explained in quite a matter-of-fact way that she thought Peter sometimes came to the nursery in the night and sat on the foot of a bed and played on his pipes to her. Unfortunately, she never woke. So she didn't know how she knew. She just knew. What nonsense you talk, Precious. No one can get into the house without knocking. I think he comes in by the window, she said. My love, it is 3 floors up. Weren't the leaves at the foot of the window, Mother? It was quite true. The leaves had been found very near the window. Okay, Wendy be calling out the mother there. You know, the mother is saying pish posh, and Wendy's like, listen, bitch, the leaves are by the window, okay? You gonna question me? I don't think so. That's all I'm gonna say. Mrs. Darling did not know what to think, for it all seemed so natural to Wendy that you could not dismiss it by saying she had been dreaming. My child, the mother cried, why did you not tell me of this before? I forgot, said Wendy lightly. She was in a hurry to get her breakfast. Oh, surely she must have been dreaming. But, on the other hand, there were the leaves. Mrs. Darling examined them very carefully. They were skeleton leaves, but she was sure they did not come from any tree that grew in England. She crawled about the floor, peering at it with a candle for marks of a strange foot. She rattled the poker up the chimney and tapped the walls. She let down a tape from the window to the pavement, and it was a sheer drop of 30 feet without so much as a spout to climb up by. Certainly, Wendy had been dreaming. But Wendy had not been dreaming, as the very next night showed. The night on which the extraordinary adventures of these children may be said to have begun. On the night we speak of, all the children were once more in bed. It happened to be Nana's evening off. Thank God they give Nana a night off. Jesus, I need a break from Mr. Darling if I were her. And Mrs. Darling had bathed them and sung to them till one by one they had let go a hand and slid away into the land of sleep. All were looking so safe and cozy that she smiled at her fears now and sat down tranquilly by the fire to sew. It was something for Michael, who on his birthday was getting into shirts. The fire was warm, however, and the nursery dimly lit by 3 night lights, and presently the sewing lay on Mrs. Darling's lap. Then her head nodded, oh, so gracefully. She was asleep. Look at the 4 of them, Wendy and Michael over there, John there, and Mrs. Darling by the fire. There should have been a 4th night light. While she slept, she had a dream. She dreamt that the Neverland had come too near and that a strange boy had broken through from it. He did not alarm her, for she thought she had seen him before in the faces of many women who have no children. Perhaps he is to be found in the faces of some mothers also. But in her dream, he had rent the film that obscures the Neverland, and she saw Wendy and John and Michael peeping through the gap. The dream by itself would have been a trifle, but while she was dreaming, the window of the nursery blew open, and a boy did drop on the floor. He was accompanied by a strange light, no bigger than your fist, which darted about the room like a living thing, and I think it must have been the light that wakened Mrs. Darling. She started up with a cry and saw the boy, and somehow she knew at once that he was Peter Pan. If you or I or Wendy had been there, we should have seen that he was very like Mrs. Darling's kiss. He was a lovely boy, clad in skeleton leaves and the juices that ooze out of trees, but the most entrancing thing about him was that he had all his first teeth. When he saw she was a grown-up, he gnashed the little pearls at her. Damn, you go, son? Oh my God, this is good, okay? So now Mrs. Darling, is she in a dreamlike state or what? She's seen Peter Pan. Oh my God, I'm going to love this book. I can tell you right now I'm going to love it because there is so much to glean from this. First off, Mr. Darling, you know what? I don't know what your deal is, but you need to be a little bit more, stop being so commonsensical about stuff because you're kind of bringing us all down, all right? And Nana, thank you for being the best friend to everybody. And Mrs. Darling, thank you for just being such a dear and such a darling. Okay, I'm going to say this because I want to go right into woo-woo because there's so much woo-woo just already in the first chapter. The fact that Mr. Darling, they were going to have a child and then didn't know if they could afford it. But Mrs. Darling was totally just like, it's going to be fine, George. We're going to have the money. It's going to be fine. And I love that because at the end of the day, we've talked about this before. It's about trusting that you're being, already supported. We can all get into that state of frenzy of like fearing shit that we don't know what's going to happen. None of us do. But you can get all like caught up in thinking about things that may never happen. And that's energy that's wasted. So think of the things, the good things that can happen because that's what you're going to draw to yourself. So I want to just reiterate because we talked about this last time with Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Trust you know what? Know that you're always being supported. And the more that you trust and keep the faith, whatever it is, and I'm not talking about, it has to be, this is not religious, this is just in general, to trust in yourself, trust in the situation, and trust that everything will work out for your betterment. The thing is this, your mind is telling you it's something different, but your spirit already knows. So drop it and trust it and move forward. Okay, next, I kind of want to say the fact that children and their imagination, we also talked about this, having your imagination and really believing things and getting to the things of, like when you were a kid, right? You thought about things and like we talked about this too, playing as if it's really true. So why not with our thoughts right now to think of things that we really want to create for ourselves? And they say thoughts are things because we are energy. We've talked about this, and I know this is a running theme, but I think that's what's important about these children's books. They're teaching children to be positive, right? And I think that's important for all of us. And that's what I love about these whimsical books, because during this time and just any time in your life, we can always go down to the negative path. And that doesn't serve you, because what happens is you're feeding the stuff that you don't want to feed, because wherever your energy goes, that's where shit's going to grow. So instead of planting seeds of negativity and seeds of fear, worry, and doubt, better to plant seeds of faith and hope and trust and the things that you do want to cultivate in your life. And I think it's really important, especially when you're feeling very out of control. And so many of us are. We're always out of control, but especially now. It's better to think of the things that could go right in your life and how you can stay in a place of knowingness and trust and use your imagination and daydream about the things that you'd like to create in your life. I also will say, I think it's very interesting to see the relationship of Mr. and Mrs. Darling, and also for us, how at times, who plays Mr. Darling in life? When do you play Mr. Darling's role of being very commonsensical and sensical and everything, or Mrs. Darling who just trusts? And just reflect back. And if you decide to journal, you can. If you're not journaling, you don't have to journal. It's okay. But think about the times when you've played Mr. Darling's part or Mrs. Darling's part or even Nana's part, the trusty nursemaid that gets a lot of shit from Mr. Darling, which I don't really like, but I digress. Also, at the end of the day, you can think about the roles you play in your own life and see how it serves you or doesn't serve you. So at this point, I think we're going to glean a lot from this, because I do, once again, there's a lot of character study that could go on with Mr. and Mrs. Darling. But I look forward to seeing the fact that Mrs. Darling is seeing Peter Pan. Oh, and I did forget to mention, you know how she talked about cleaning out the thoughts of the kids, the negative or the bad stuff, and the next day they'd wake up and they'd have a fresh mind? Same like us. Every day at the end of the day, I like to do this. Right before you go to bed, think of everything that you're grateful for. Everything. I'm talking to people, the things that you, like, you know, just your health, everything. And just do this whole gratitude list. So now you clear away all the fear, worry, and doubts and all those other thoughts you have. But you go to bed with a clear mind and a very grateful, like, mindset of all the things you're happy for. So the next day you wake up with a new mindset. Listen, I'm not playing down anything that's going on in our world today. We are all in this together, even if we're not in it physically together. We're all on it on another level. And what I'm going to say, it's really important for us to fill our minds right now with the things that keep us positive and hopeful. And I think that, you know, using your imagination and being grateful is another way for you to stay positive and hopeful and trust and really focus on the good things that can come out of any situation, even when it seems like it's darkest. Because remember, it's always darkest before the dawn. So I am going to encourage you before you go to bed at night to do a gratitude list, because an attitude of gratitude will change your latitude. Yeah, pass that on. All right, my friends. All right, that was just one chapter of 9 pages. And look how much I could talk. I know I keep talking a lot. Anyway, thank you so much for joining again. You know what? If you're watching this, maybe you want to put on your pajamas. I mean, you're home watching it, put on your pajamas, watch it when you watch pajamas, wear your pajamas, and you know what? You're in the book with me. Anyway, my friends, you stay blessed, stay healthy, stay sane, and just remember to have an attitude of gratitude, trust, keep positive as much as you can, all right? And know that you are not alone, all right? Stay blessed. Until next time, bye! Oh, and watch Hook with Robin Williams. I'm sure you can stream it. Trust me, it's either on Hulu, Amazon, Netflix, HBO, I don't know. Hook, so good, so good. Okay, bye.